Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Muhammad Afifullah bin Shafi'i with my friends Rosdiana, Alia and Fariha. So today we are going to present about film censorship. For the introduction of this presentation, we are going to look at the issues and objectives of the study. So the significance of the study and the research method. Next, I am going to present the background or history of film censorship in Malaysia and the definition and importance of film censorship. And lastly, I will talk about the role of FINAS and the Film Censorship Board, which is LPF. So the objective of this study, or the reason why we choose this topic, is to study the history of film censorship in Malaysia and to discuss the process and the examples of banned films and compare it to the United Kingdom. And the significance of the study is because of the lack of enforcement related to film censorship, and there are loopholes in the legal framework. All the data collected for this presentation are from journal articles, law cases, websites, and news and report. The history of how film censorship was implemented in Malaysia is dated back to 1908, when the police were given the power by the government to control and determine the suitability of the film scenes in Malaysia. During that time, many raids and seizures happened due to a breach of law on film censorship. In 1917, Film Censor was created specifically, which is still under the police authority to administer the film censorship process. But later in 1954, LPF was established in Singapore, but changed its operation base to Kuala Lumpur due to the succession of Singapore from the Federation of Malaysia in 1966. The Film Censorship Act 2002 is the act that is effective until today. Any film that is to be screened in Malaysia must be certified by the LPF under the provisions of the act. So no one is allowed to view any film that has not been licensed by the board, which is the LPF, the Lembaga Penapisan Filem. Now let us see what does it mean by film censorship. So censorship is the suppression of speech, public communication or other information which may be considered harmful and sensitive. So anything that is considered sensitive and harmful to be watched, like pornography, violence or any actions that are dangerous, will be censored. So what is the importance of film censorship? Film censorship is needed to avoid from young viewers to copy the task of their heroes which perform on screen, which may cost them their life, for example in superhero movies. So second one, to censor the part of a movie that contains scenes or language that cannot be accepted by people of all religions. And lastly, to prevent certain parts of movies to help keeps the children away from hearing and seeing inappropriate things, like in the movie 50 Shades of Grey. And a recent case of mass murder in an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, has proved that film censorship is mandatory. The mass shooting was performed by a kid aged 18, which believed to copy the action from an action movie or film. So next, let us learn what is FINAS and what is their objective and role. So according to the FINAS official website, the main objective of FINAS is to uplift, nurture and facilitate the development of the Malaysian film industry. So FINAS is the body that is responsible for developing the film industry in Malaysia. Many films like Roh, Pradat Sapu and Lelaki Harapan Dunia have been contested at prestigious film awards such as the Oscars. The vision of FINAS is to catalyze the domestic growth of the Malaysian film industry and its international visibility. As mentioned earlier, competing for local films at international film awards can further increase the popularity of local films on the international stage. So FINAS has four missions, which are to position Malaysia as privileged destination for national and international productions, escalating film industry services and facilities, and to solidify talent development with requisite skills and competencies. And lastly, to elevate the support and encourage the spirit of loving Malaysian films. So we can take Hollywood and Bollywood as great examples in promoting their film industry to the world. Right now, let's see what is the role of the Film Censorship Board, LPF, or Lembaga Penartisan Film. LPF is responsible to implement policies for film censorship and censoring films all across Malaysia, and reviews films, advertisements for approval in order to be distributed and viewed within the country. So this power has been granted since its inception on 1st May 1954 in Singapore, and in 1966 continued its operation in Kuala Lumpur after the secession of Singapore from the Federation of Malaysia. So now we are going to look at the process of film censorship. So applicants wishing to apply for film censorship must be in advance or previously registered the company with the Censorship Control Division Film and Enforcement, which is under Ministry of Home Affairs. And only complete filtering applications according to the checklist will be registered in the Film Censorship Information System, which is e-film, and followed by the filtering process. So after the approval of the screening is done by the chairman of the LPF, Sijil Perakuan A will be printed and given to the applicant within 5 working days. So that's all from me. I pass the presentation to Alia. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum and a very good day. I am your Alia Zahra, and now let's continue with the next part of the presentation. Before we watch any movie at the cinema or TV shows at home, we would always be shown this logo before the show starts, right? These are called the film classification logo, and it is a form of censorship where restrictions are imposed on the audience on what films could a person view. The film classifications act as a guideline for individuals or parents or guardians to decide which films should their or the person under their care view. The films that have been approved by the Film Censorship Board are classified into 3 categories as shown here. The first one is the one with the blue background and the letter U. This category is for viewing by all walks of life without age limit. The film portrays good values, decency, and positive lessons as well as entertaining. Some examples are like Despicable Me, The Princess Diaries, and Toy Story. The next one with a yellow background and the word P13 is the film classification, which means that viewers under 13 years of age need their parental or guardian supervision while viewing. Scenes in the film consist of horror elements, scary, negative acts, suspense and frantic elements, elusive storyline, and elements that can disturb a child's emotion. For instance, Avengers Endgame, Jurassic World, and Interstellar. The last one is the one with the red color as the background and the number 18. This category is for viewers aged 18 and above. The film contains elements of horror, gory, and violent, but not excessive, adult scene that is also not excessive, social, sensitive, political, and religious elements which require a high level of understanding. The movie examples are Deadpool, Juanita, and Abang Long Fadil. Moving on to the applicable law in film censorship. The Film Censorship Act 2002 is the act that is effective today. Any film that is to be screened in Malaysia must be certified by the board. Under the provisions of the act, no one is allowed to view any film that has not been licensed by the board. Section 5 of the Film Censorship Act talks about nobody can possess or causing oneself having in possession or telecasting, screening, distributing, displaying, making, producing, selling, or rent out any films of pornography film, publicity, material, or otherwise are against public decency. Therefore, anyone who commits an offence and when incriminated can be fined not less than 10,000 ringgit and not more than 50,000 ringgit or jailed for a term not more than 5 years or both. Section 6 of the Film Censorship Act is about how no person shall have in his possession or in his custody or under his control or circulate, exhibit, distribute, display, manufacture, produce, sell or hire any film or film publicity material which has not been approved by the board. Anyone who violates subsection 1 that commits an offence and when incriminated can be fined not less than 5,000 and not more than 30,000 or jailed for a term of not more than 3 years or both. Next, section 9 subsection 1 says that the owner of a film should present the film to the board for censorship according to the required method without any change or cut and at own risk and expense. The owner of a film who violates the subsection and is found to commit an offence and when incriminated can be fined not less than 5,000 ringgit and not more than 30,000 or jailed for a term not more than 3 years or both. There are not many law cases regarding film censorship. However, there is a case on a film titled Papi. The main plot of Papi involves school violence that purportedly took place in secondary school in the southern part of Malaysia in 2000. The film was wholly shot, produced and released in Taiwan, and the director, Namiwi, had no plans to promote or distribute the film in Malaysia. Namiwi also said that the goal of the team in making the film was never about the fame or profit, and was instead purely a way to achieve the dream of making a film. However, the film producer, Toh Han Boon, was accused of committing the offence of not obtaining a valid license from the National Film Development Corporation, FINAS, for the production and the promotion of the movie Papi on November 18, 2020. He claimed trial at the magistrate's court for the offence that he was accused. According to the charge sheet, Toh allegedly participated in the production and distribution of promotional posters for the film without an authorized license from FINAS. The sole charge was framed under Section 22 subsection 1 of the FINAS Act, Act 244, which states that no person shall engage in any activities of production, distribution or exhibition of films or any combination of those activities as specified in subsection 21, unless there is in force a license authorizing him to do the same. The accused had entered his plea before Magistrate Muhammad Iskandar Zainul. The prosecutor Zamriah Zarifah Aris prosecuted, while the accused was represented by lawyer Muhammad Haijan Omar. The prosecution initially offered a bail at 8,000 ringgit for the charge and for the court to confiscate the passport of the accused until the conclusion of the trial. During mitigation, Muhammad Haijan objected to the bail amount offered by the prosecution, arguing that it was unreasonable for the nature of the offence committed. The magistrate later allowed the accused bail of 5,000 ringgit with one surety. Additionally, there was a police report made against the movie by Persatuan Seniman Malaysia for allegedly having elements of racism that tarnished Malaysia's image. Despite all the charge that producer has went through, Barbie has received several nominations at international film festivals, such as the Golden Horse Awards in Taiwan, Bangkok International Film Festival, and Around International Film Festival in Berlin. That is all from me, and now I would like to hand over the presentation to my groupmate Rostiana.
Thank you, Alia. Assalamualaikum, my name is Rosiana, and now I will proceed with the guidelines on film censorship under LBF, recent issues, as well as findings and conclusion. So without further ado, let's begin. Now, according to LPF, the guidelines on film censorship are mainly aimed to assist film enthusiasts in understanding the government's policies on the matters that need to be given attention to in the content of a film. So it is important to acknowledge the importance of film censorship because we all know how films and media can have a tremendous influence on the public, especially youth and children. Therefore, the Malaysian film censorship guidelines are implemented based on four aspects, which are security and public order, religion, socioculture, as well as decorum and morality. So these aspects share the same goal, which is to display good societal values and avoid unwanted negative impacts on the viewers. Now I am going to explain to you what each of these aspects is all about. Firstly, it must ensure that films should not contain any elements that may pose a threat on safety, public order, and national security. For instance, films that provoke the government or threaten the harmony of the society will not be allowed under the security and public order aspect. The second aspect is religion. Now, films must not insult or portray any negative representation of any religions. For example, films that condone any beliefs that are opposed with any religion's teachings are strictly prohibited. Next, socio-culture is another aspect that must be considered before releasing a film to the public. Any elements that disrespect, degrade, or mock the societal values like customs and traditions will not be tolerated. Other examples that are contradictory to the social culture aspects are films that contain full nudity, sexual scenes, extreme violence, or children taking drugs or drinking alcohol. And lastly, decorum and morality emphasize on the portrayal of good moral values that viewers can reflect upon. So some of the noble values that are recommended under LPF include believe in God, love and kindness, mutual respect, courtesy, independence, justice, patriotism, happy family, physical and mental well-being, environmental conversation, and many more. Now, another important part under the guidelines on film censorship is language. So basically, any words or speech that have negative connotations or meanings in terms of religion, race, customs, or taboos are highly discouraged and will be censored if there's any. So these are some of the words that are listed under the guidelines. They are divided into four common languages that are spoken in Malaysia: Malay, English, Tamil, and Chinese language. So maybe you can take a look for a bit. Okay, moving on. Now let's have a look on the recent issues related to film censorship in Malaysia. I am going to give some examples of films that face some issues related to censorship, banning, and controversy. So here are some of the films that dealt with film censorship issues. So Beauty and the Beast was initially banned by LPF as it promotes homosexuality, which are highly contradictory to most religious teachings. So there were a few gay scenes in the movie that trigger the religious value. However, the ban was eventually revoked after Disney's appeal was approved. Huge public backlash also contributed to the ban revoke, as people argued that the gay scene was very brief and it barely lasted a minute, so there shouldn't be any issue about it. Alright, next is a movie called Barbie, directed by a controversial local filmmaker named Namawi. It became the talk of the town around 2 years ago when it was released abroad. So Namawi clarified that this movie was never submitted locally because he knew that it was not going to get approved by LPF and FINAS due to the highly controversial nature of the film, as it contains profanity, violence, and other elements that are contradictory to the Malaysian socio-cultural values. So he was in fact proving his point, because despite the film being released outside Malaysia, it still became an issue in the country as someone of high authority lodged a police report against him for touching on racial sensitivities in the movie poster. Alright, furthermore, recently in 2018, a total of 8 movies were totally banned in Malaysia. So this is the list of the banned movies. All of these movies are banned for similar reasons that go against the guidelines on film censorship, such as the promotion of LGBT elements or homosexuality, negative depiction of Islam and Muslims, and extreme sexual as well as violence scenes. Okay, next. So another issue that I would like to talk about here is the local horror movie called Dukun that was released in 2018. So this movie was initially filmed in 2006 and it was denied for release in 2007. LPF banned the movie before its screening due to the sensitive nature of its plot, which offended the families of the people being portrayed in the movie. However, after 12 years, it got leaked online, and FINAS took the issue very seriously as they describe it as a violation of intellectual property. However, regardless of that, the damage had been done and the film was then released nationwide despite its controversial nature. So Dukun was classified under P13 with 5 gruesome scenes being deleted by the censorship board. Now, we're gonna move on to the findings and discussion of this topic by discussing the issues and challenges faced by Malaysian film censorship today. So according to the chairman of LPF, Muhammad Zambari, the guidelines on film censorship Malaysia are constantly reviewed so that they would remain relevant with the latest and current issues and trends. So based on a paper by Islam 2019, film directors are very dissatisfied with the strictness of the censorship guidelines, especially for age 18 categories. They question the fact that there are still too many deletion of scenes in 18-rated films when viewers who are above the age of 18 are supposed to be able to make their own judgments of what is right and what is wrong. So it can be pointed out that the strictness of Malaysian censorship board is quite unnecessary when it comes to 18-rated films or adult films. Okay, another issue that can be seen in Malaysian censorship guidelines is the limited classifications. We only have 3 classifications and apparently it is not enough because there is a huge gap between P13 and 18 categories. So Zambari mentioned that, and I quote, some scenes could be deemed inappropriate for children 13 years old and and I quote, some scenes could be deemed inappropriate for children 13 years old and under, but is something that a 16-year-old has no trouble understanding and accepting. So a category in between could breach that. And then he proceeded to suggest some more categories to be introduced, such as P15 or P16. And last but not least, according to a news article by New Straits Times in 2019, Malaysian Film Censorship Board faces a challenge with public perception as there were accusations saying that LPF is restricting the creativity of local filmmakers and film distributors. However, Muhammad Zambari responded to the accusations by saying that the current censorship policies are necessary as it benefits all parties. So that'll be all for my part. Now Fariha will proceed with the conclusion. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum and a very good day I bid to our lecturer, Madam Madiha. I am Nur Fariha and now I will be presenting on the comparisons of film censorship in Malaysia and the UK, recommendations, Islamic perspectives, and end my presentation with a conclusion. First of all, we will be looking at the comparisons of film censorship in Malaysia and in the UK in terms of the Film Board. We will see the organization or board who is responsible for Malaysia and the UK. We will also be looking at the classification of film for both countries. Other than that, we'll be going through the process of film censorship and classification in Malaysia and the UK. Next, I will be providing some examples of the films banned in the UK and the reason why they were banned, as well as highlighting the related law for film censorship in the UK. It has been established earlier that in Malaysia, the board responsible for film censorship is the Film Censorship Board, or Lembaga Penapis Filem, LPF, whereas in the UK, the same board or organization is called British Board of Film Classification, BBFC. The censorship guidelines provided by the LPF and BBFC are very different. Since Malaysia consists of different backgrounds, races, and cultures, these aspects have to be taken into account when it comes to the censorship guidelines to avoid conflicts in the country. The LPF also take contents that contain national threats, decorum, and morality seriously. BBFC, on the other hand, looks into issues such as bad language, dangerous behavior, discrimination, and others to classify the films accordingly. It is actually very rare for them to have to censor or cut parts in films. Why is that? Let's look at the next part. It is due to the classification that the UK imposed on films. If Malaysia only has 3 classifications of films, which are general, P13 and 18, the United Kingdom has introduced 6 classifications of film. The U is for universal watch, suitable for the people of all ages. PG refers to the need for parental guidance. 12A films contain materials that are not suitable for children under the age of 12, and they might need to be accompanied by adults if they wish to watch them in a cinema. Films rated 12 are pretty similar to 12A, only this classification is found on videos and DVDs. 15 rated films mean that they're only suitable to be watched by people who are 15 and above. And lastly, 18 rated films indicate that they should be watched by adults. The biggest difference can be seen in the process of film censorship and classification for both countries. From the process, it can be seen that Malaysia mainly focuses on censorship, while in the UK, they only mention age rating classification for their films. It may seem that BBFC allows most films to be available in the UK, but there are some films that have been banned in the UK, and the recent examples are Hate Crime 2013 and The Bunny Game 2010. These films are thought to not be in line with the board's guidelines and could potentially cause harm to the public. When it comes to the film censorship law in the UK, BBFC is vague about it. There's not much law on film censorship because BBFC doesn't have many restrictions for films to be released and available, as long as it doesn't violate the guidelines and gets classified accordingly. However, there is one law introduced which is called the Video Recordings Act 1984, and this act emphasized the need for physical format videos to get a film classification before being released to the public. While the film censorship in the UK is more lenient than in Malaysia, what Malaysia is imposing on films is very much relevant and reasonable considering the context of our country. However, we do think that the film censorship in Malaysia could be improved. For example, LPF could introduce more film classifications. This would make the film censorship easier to be sorted out and allow more films to be released. Furthermore, there should be more leniency for films that are 18 rated, as adults are capable to make judgments of their own whether something is right or wrong. It also doesn't hurt to take other countries' guidelines on film censorship as a reference to improve the film guideline for our film industry. As for the Islamic perspective, one of the elements from the concept of Maqasid Sharia, which is the protection of intellect, would fit this topic, as films can be a beneficial medium to consume if they contain useful messages and are able to set examples for the public. La dara wa la dirar, which means no harm to oneself and is not harmful to others, highlight the importance of film censorship and why it is needed to a certain extent. We have looked at the conceptual framework and background to understand film censorship better. We also identified the organizations that are involved and play a role in film censorship, as well as made comparisons between Malaysian film censorship and the UK film classification. Overall, we can see how important film censorship is and the need for its implementation in films. In the future, it is hoped that we are able to see improvements in film censorship in Malaysia, as there are still rooms for us to do so. That would be all from us. Thank you for listening.